So I think we're just getting started. So Bill had the last minute change. So from Web3 Web Foundation, so we'll not be able to join us today. But I think we can still cover the Polkadot part, the Web3 Foundation part. I think Dan has some experience there. And later on, I think we have Raul. Potentially, he can cover that part as well. So that being said, I will get a meeting of the event started. I think we'll have more people joining. And also, just want to make sure with Sacha, you don't mind we record this event, right? Awesome. All right. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the event today. So this event will introduce Polkadot, Substrate, and its ecosystem companies, the top project in the ecosystem, Moonbeam and Acala. So my name is Kun Peng. I'm doing a master's degree in Stanford University, Management Science Engineering, and also part of the leadership team in Stanford Blockchain Club. So the goal of Stanford Blockchain Club is to become like thought leaders in the blockchain space, the Stanford community. And we're a group of enthusiasts and fans of blockchain technology and the crypto industry, trying to promote the industry and ideas around blockchain in the Stanford community. So feel free to email me afterwards if you are interested to join Stanford Blockchain Club. That being said, it's our honor today to have a great panelist joining us. So we have Derek Yu. I'm just reading the name based on the order. I mean that appears on my screen. So today it's a great honor to have our panelist, Derek Yu, CEO of Purestake, and then we have Dan Reecer, VP of Growth at Acala Network, and then we also have Sacha Lansky, which is from Parity, so a developer advocate at the Parity Technologies. So yeah, I think if to get it started, I think each of you can give like a minute or two introduction of your company or the project you represent, and also a little bit about yourself. That'll be great. I think we can start. Is up here on my screen. Derek first.
Sure. So hi everybody. So I'm Derek Yu. I'm the CEO of Purestake, as was mentioned. So we're the company building the project Moonbeam. My background has been in kind of building cloud and software companies my whole career, technology companies, but been working in the blockchain space since the beginning of 2019. And specifically, our project is one of the prominent ecosystem projects in the Polkadot ecosystem. So definitely can share maybe a bit of perspective from this kind of ecosystem side of what it's like to build in Polkadot.
Awesome, thank you, Derek. It's our pleasure to have you here. The next one I have is Dan Reecer.
Yep. Everybody, Dan Reecer, working on growth at Acala. We're actually building two networks right now, Acala and Karura, and we can get into more details on Polkadot and Kusama later. I've been in the blockchain industry for a few years now. Prior to that, I was in pharmaceuticals, but spend most of my time on growth, which is really like marketing, community building, business development. I can scratch the surface at a high level on the technical aspects, and hopefully Sacha and Derek can kind of cover for whatever else I might not know. Acala is building what we're calling a DeFi hub on Polkadot. So it's two things. It's a blockchain layer 1 launching on Polkadot, which is basically optimized for DeFi applications to build on top of. And then we've built an application layer on top of our blockchain for 3 core products. So we've got the AUSD stablecoin, the Acala DEX, it's an AMM style DEX, and then liquid dot staking, which basically allows people to get liquidity for staked assets. So that's Acala in a nutshell. You can pass it on to Sacha now. Thanks for having me.
Yep, thank you for the introduction. So here, Sacha.
Yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me and us. I mean, I speak on behalf of like the the ecosystem community. It's great to be on this panel with Derek and Dan, who I've heard a lot about, and the stuff that they're building is fascinating. And so from my perspective, I'm privileged to be witnessing all these amazing things being built with Substrate. Being developer advocate for Substrate at Parity Technologies, my role is really to kind of bridge the innovation being created at Parity, with the engineering teams working and pushing new technologies pretty much every other week, and really bringing that into the hands of developers that would want to be building solutions like we're seeing with Moonbeam, for example, or Acala. So as a developer advocate, I'm very passionate about bridging those two worlds.
Awesome. Thank you, Sacha. Yeah, thank you for all the introductions. So now we'll start with the list of questions that we came up with and some of the questions we collected from the Google form. And then on we'll open up the floor for question and second part of the event. So to start off, and this is a question for anyone in the panel, for every panelist, if you feel comfortable, or you have knowledge on Polkadot, can you do like a high-level introduction of Polkadot, maybe very high-level technical aspect as well, just to the Stanford community? Yeah, just high-level.
Maybe I can just jump in with a very high level of what Polkadot is. It's a blockchain that is providing a security layer for other chains to connect to it. And so Polkadot's mission is to provide that layer, that foundational layer, so that builders could be building what we call parachains that can benefit from the pooled security of that main chain. And now I think I want to pass it over to Derek, somebody who has actually been, on the other side of things, building solutions that can benefit from that. So I think Derek probably can give a better contextual answer to that.
Sure. Yes. I mean, I think you hit on it. I think that from our perspective, there's obviously many places you can choose, to build these days. There's no shortage of developer-oriented, blockchain platforms to build on. I think the key attractions, for us, on the one hand, it's Substrate as a development framework. I think, I've been involved with some teams building blockchains from scratch, and obviously it can be done, but it's a pretty substantive effort. And I think with things like Substrate, I think I'd probably also put the Cosmos SDK in this platform in the same bucket. It's just a dramatic reduction in the time and energy needed to create a blockchain. So. And Substrate in particular has some very desirable properties. But that was one attraction, was we wanted to build what we wanted to build. Substrate made it was just shortened the amount of effort a lot. And then the main attraction from our perspective for Polkadot is kind of just what Sacha was explaining, is really this kind of connectivity. So by being under the same security umbrella, we can have these kind of collaboration opportunities with other blockchains or parachains that are part of Polkadot. And so I think that's quite unique, basically, right? Most blockchains are kind of standalone entities. So, even, if you look at with Acala, right? I think we're going to have some integration scenarios, even in pretty short order here as we launch, where, we'll be able to, even in the simplest case, move tokens back and forth between our chains, because we're both parachains on Polkadot. In a way that's secure. So I think this kind of combination of the framework for being able to build specialized blockchains combined with the ability for them to interact with each other, those are the key elements from my perspective.
Yeah, I'll just add to both of those points. The way we talk about it at the highest level is that Polkadot is like a layer 0 meta protocol. So we've got Ethereum and Bitcoin that have been these traditional isolated layer 1 chains. What Polkadot is it's one layer below that. And like Derek said and Sacha said, it's connecting and securing all the layer 1 blockchains that connect to Polkadot. So those are the layer 1 chains. And then every application that's built on Polkadot is actually built on a parachain. So Moonbeam, Acala, and several others, those layer 1 chains, are all optimized for a specific purpose. You've got Moonbeam, which is like this seamless experience of building Ethereum applications on Moonbeam. And you could have Acala, which is kind of specialized in DeFi. And like Derek said, in the future, you can have interoperability between applications on those layer 1 parachains. So you could have SushiSwap, which is launching on Moonbeam using a stablecoin, the Acala dollar stablecoin from the Acala chain, because they're all kind of connected within this Polkadot ecosystem. So that's the highest level. Another benefit of Substrate that I think I'm more and more realizing the importance of is this concept of forkless upgrades. So with Substrate, we can constantly be upgrading our chains, sometimes weekly, like Sacha was saying, without the need to fork the community, to fork all the tokens. So this, compared to another chain where you have to fork in order to create an upgrade, this is going to lead to, I think, just a kind of unseen innovation in terms of just exponential rate of being able to constantly upgrade the base layer of the chain versus only being able to innovate at the application layer. So I guess that's it for me.
All right. Thank you for the great points about what make Polkadot like so unique. And also just for the audience to know, in case you have any questions when the panelists mention any point, feel free to put the question in the chat. So later on, like when we get to the question part, open the floor for questions. I will just read the question from the chat. Yeah, so actually my second question is about Substrate and the technical framework. I think everyone panel actually mentioned it briefly. I don't know if you had any additional point to add on for Substrate.
Yeah, I was as Dan was finishing up, it occurred to me it's important to understand what Substrate came out of, and kind of interchangeably with how Polkadot came about, right? And so when the team behind the building of Polkadot was happening, well, it became very apparent that there's a lot of these pieces that can be kind of reused and they're used in a modular way, right? This is like this sense of modularity is really at the core of the design of Polkadot. And in building Polkadot that way, it became evident that we could abstract out all these like really like difficult things like consensus layers, like just having some sort of asset class, RPC, these core components that anyone that building a blockchain needs to have, but it's very difficult to achieve just from scratch. Well, that we can then put them on the shelf for anyone to come and use to build their own custom solution. So in building Polkadot, Substrate became this growing, resource then that became used as Polkadot was being built. And so Substrate then became this framework whose values really lie into this modularity of building blockchains, right? And so we're abstracting out as much as possible these core pieces that then can be used interchangeably with other kind of a very plug and play way of building blockchains.
Yeah, I want to add to the history comment there. One thing that we kind of forgot to mention was that Polkadot was founded by Gavin Wood, who invented the Solidity programming language, and he was the CTO of Ethereum and really built the EVM in the beginning. And that's the history, is that he realized that it wasn't going to scale. So then he left and started creating Polkadot, and he invented the Substrate framework. So Substrate is built with this history of building solidity and knowing like what problems needed to be solved when building this new framework. So Substrate has this advantage in being a kind of more advanced model in building blockchains based on all of Gavin's learnings from Ethereum. And to also build on Sacha's point around the modularity of this. So I'm not a developer, but the way I kind of explain it is it's like drag and drop blockchain development, because you've got these little modules, you can kind of pick and choose and add that to your chain. But you can also, so all the palettes, these Substrate palettes have been built for the most part by Parity up to now. But the cool thing is that other teams outside of Parity have already been building their own palettes, and this will continue to happen. And all of these palettes can be added to the Substrate framework so that you not only get like the predefined palettes from Parity, but we can all constantly be using each other's development and innovation over the years. So when I mentioned that Acala is building a DeFi optimized chain, I'm actually talking about it at the blockchain like Substrate palette level. So what we've been able to do with Substrate is, for example, with our EVM that we built called the Acala EVM, we've been able to customize specific aspects of the chain for DeFi. So one cool example, if you've been using DeFi at all recently, you realize that the fees are super high, but it's also just a pain to have to go out and find ETH to pay any transaction fee. But with Substrate, we were able to customize the ability to pay gas fees in any token. So when we have a bridge from Ethereum to Acala, you can wrap Ethereum, bring it over to Acala, and then the first transaction you pay can be with that exact wrapped ETH from Ethereum. Same with Bitcoin, you can pay your first transaction with Bitcoin if you bring Bitcoin over to Acala to use in DeFi. So just an example of what you can do with these Substrate palettes at the blockchain layer.
I can kind of jump in here for a third point. You know, I mean, for me, there's like, you know, there's all these different design approaches you see, you know, for different developer-oriented blockchains, spanning from, you know, ones that are just like a single chain, but, you know, high transaction throughput and performance, to, you know, Polkadot's more sharded approach. And there's, you know, a bunch of different, you know, different permutations kind of in between. I think the thing that, you know, one of the things that I highlighted before that I would highlight again is that, you know, Substrate, it not only makes development of, you know, blockchain easier, but it allows in this like Polkadot system for the specialization like of the shards, right? So like other systems may be sharded, but, you know, generally like all the shards will be the same, right? So you'd offer kind of the same, let's say, developer API on each of the shards. There's a number of systems that work that way. But I think that the special thing here is that, you know, the Parity team has gone to, you just have this like ultimate like in customizability, where if you really want to, you know, change the nature. I mean, in our case, we, you know, optimized and changed like, you know, our shard so that it kind of resembles Ethereum. Like, and that was part of our go-to-market strategy and our product strategy. But, you know, other teams are pursuing different things. I mean, you know, they might have a storage optimized chain, and then that will look, you know, much different. So I do think that it's kind of the idea that Substrate allows for this like specialization in the context of Polkadot. That's the thing that is probably the most interesting to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I also I can't help but throw in some other like maybe more technical things that are also part of this kind of, we say it's an extensible framework. It means it can really adapt to whatever use case, right? And the core design approach is it has to be flexible, you know, to account for use cases that could be, you know, very unique and like Derek was describing, and so all of Substrate is written in the Rust programming language. Rust becomes a very key part of enabling a lot of these kind of modular ways of writing code, really. And you know, we can abstract all these things out into really like kind of bulletproof libraries. I mean, you know, Rust is a programming language that will you know, the programming language that it gives you guarantees that, you know, it will run. It's very good at finding bugs, basically, and it won't compile without it, you know, being sure that your palette works, right? So that's from a security perspective, that the programming language is very, very powerful. Now the second thing, the more important thing, the thing that I want to bring to the table here is Rust compiles to WASM. So, you know, there's some solutions out there, some community initiatives doing smart contracts that compile to WASM. So WASM is WebAssembly, and using these technologies, right, we inherently Substrate, as you know, as time goes by, is going to be very adaptable to the evolution of, you know, the future. These technologies that we don't really know how, you know, they're still nascent, right, in where they are today. But Substrate is built in a way that is really kind of looking forward, looking ahead into the future to be as extensible as modular as possible.
Yeah, Thank you, Sacha, Derek, and Dan for the open point. And great to know that Polkadot has such Substrate like such a modular, flexible framework, and then can leverage what like Gavin would learn from Ethereum. So I already saw like we have quite some people from the CS department on Stanford. So maybe we will kind of come back to this point, or this aspect of Substrate later on if there's interest from the audience. So just moving on to the next question we have. So we'd like to know about kind of from your perspective, either Substrate, Polkadot, or like the ecosystem, like from Moonbeam and Acala perspective, what do you think is like the main differences or advantages of Polkadot compared to other blockchains, like especially Ethereum? And how is Polkadot like defensible, right? Yeah. Anyone
take that? I'm happy to jump in. I can take it if you like. I mean, yeah, I think I think we kind of mentioned already some of the key points, but I would say that when we're, at least from our perspective, when we're thinking about different blockchains, we tend to not think about things in terms of this kind of zero-sum game. Sometimes you hear this like term like Ethereum killer, right? There's Ethereum, and then there's all these Ethereum killers trying to. I guess that's not like that's not the way we look at it, and frankly, that's not like what we see happening like in terms of what actual project teams are doing and what they're looking at. So to give you an example, a lot of the teams that we're working with at this point, I mean, we're just in this big shift, right? It used to be that it was just a monochain kind of environment, right, where people were just deploying to Ethereum, and that was like the one blockchain where the bulk of the activity was. And I think what we're seeing now, and this is true of a lot of the partner projects we're working with, is that they're pursuing, what I would call a multi-chain deployment strategy, right? So they're kind of seeing that, hey, there's different, blockchains that may have different users, different assets, different, specializations. And, they're like a lot of these protocols are then now deploying across like multiple chains. So it's not kind of this, oh, it's either this or, or that. For us, there's a lot of teams that are given our kind of Ethereum compatibility. One pattern we're seeing is this, what I call like EVM targeted multi-chain deployment strategy, where you take like your Ethereum code base, you can deploy it to Ethereum, but you can also deploy it to something like Moonbeam. And for them, they just see it as, hey, like I have a DeFi protocol, I'm trying to increase my DAUs, my MAUs, I'm trying to increase my TVL, which is a metric that often is tracked for DeFi projects, total value locked. And yeah, I think at this point, most teams are pursuing this kind of multi-chain strategy. So yeah, I think in that context, Polkadot definitely has users, in a lot of cases unique users, and it has a bunch of assets that are unique to it as well. And so that's been kind of the draw from a lot of the project teams that we've been working with. They want to figure out how to like service like those users and assets.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Any other points to add on? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question.
I guess I want to add like that. From my perspective, I think the more valuable answer to this question is the one that Derek gave. Kind of someone that really is actually building a solution that could be comparable to other existing solutions on other blockchains, right? But from my perspective, it's the very architecture and the way things work with building blockchains with Substrate kind of forces you to rethink how you want to achieve the thing you want to achieve. And so in Substrate, we have the concept of a runtime, right? So your runtime logic encapsulates how your chain acts on a meta level, but also you can then sort of compartmentalize logic that maybe resembles what a traditional smart contract would be doing. The difference, though, is that it's not a smart contract. It's just code that your chain is running, and every block cycle, executing the functions in your runtime. Now, you can add smart contracts to it, but the interesting thing that I'm seeing people building with Substrate is, and I'm saying on a more like individual developer level, it's forcing them to kind of think, okay, what do I need a smart contract for? Can I encapsulate that logic in my runtime? And what are the other things that I could be doing, right? Because the smart contract stuff is very interesting for very specific use cases, but there's so much more that one can do with Substrate, and this concept of having a lot more logic that doesn't require gas, for example. It doesn't require a very expensive computation to run, right? And I'm thinking of things like just having governance, having special palettes that do things for you that you could do in a smart contract in an Ethereum environment. But here, we don't even need to talk about it in the context of a smart contract that's using very heavy computation to run. We can, it forces us to kind of be a little flexible in a very attractive and appealing way, I would say. I don't know if Dan or Derek, you have any comments on that, but from my perspective, kind of the difference is also an approach in how we're designing our solutions now in the blockchain space.
Yeah, I mean, I would just chime in that, I mean, that's true as well, that there's a new kind of design space that's being opened up by using Substrate, right, versus just using like smart contracts. So I mean, that's absolutely like true. I think that's kind of goes back to that specialization point, right? So you can optimize like the whole, all the way down to bedrock, kind of the whole foundation of the blockchain to your purpose. And so we're seeing that with app specific chains. I mean, I'm kind of pretty hot on like some of the more infrastructural chains that are being developed on Polkadot, where they might provide things like an identity service, a storage service, different kinds of services. Because that's kind of the thing I see moving forward, that there's going to be kind of the possibility of creating natively multi-chain applications on Polkadot that leverage some of these specialized services. So kind of like the vision is kind of like a AWS with like the different kind of like services you have in AWS, but decentralized instead, right? Where a developer can choose like which services they want to comprise their application. So that's a little bit futuristic still, but I see these teams are kind of starting now and building, and so that's something that I think is uniquely enabled by by Polkadot.
Yeah, one comment to, I guess, combine what Derek and Sacha both said. At a higher level, in terms of the momentum that Substrate has in terms of blockchain development right now, one thing that we haven't mentioned is that Substrate chains, one of the advantages of plugging into Polkadot's network, of course, is to inherit that security and not have to worry about going out and recruiting a whole set of validators. But we haven't mentioned that you can also build these Substrate chains independently. And one of the best examples of that also kind of goes along with Derek's comment about this multi-chain infrastructure is Compound. So one of the leading teams in DeFi from Ethereum, they went through this period where they were evaluating every type of technology to build a new independent chain outside of Ethereum for this Compound chain that they're building. And of all choices, they chose to build with Substrate, and they've chosen to become and remain independent. So they're building Compound chain independent of Ethereum. There will of course be kind of plumbing and piping between them and Ethereum. But we've also started a project with between Acala and Compound to build this gateway, or what they're calling a starport, between Acala and Compound. So this independent Substrate chain of Compound will be this multi-chain money market that they're building, leveraging Substrate, but choosing to remain independent and recruit their own set of validators and security to secure their network.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the good points of what's kind of unique about Substrate, and we might come back, as mentioned before, to the point once like there's more interest or questions from the audience. So move on to the next question we have is like, what's your vision and like the roadmap for like, for instance, for Substrate and Moonbeam and Acala for like the rest of this year and also 2022?
I can jump in first. I mean, I think, and I think Dan will probably say the same thing. I mean, like we have like network launches, like where we're staring down the barrel of like network launches. I think both of us here, and so that's obviously in the near term. The focus is just on launching like as parachains successfully. Like Acala, we have like 2 network deployments planned, like one for the Kusama network, which is this kind of companion network to Polkadot that has its same code base, and things happen there first. That's a separate topic we can perhaps go into, but we're I think both of our teams, so we'll be deploying kind of as a parachain first to Kusama and then later to Polkadot. So I mean, that's definitely the kind of the near-term focus. I would say that as I look a little bit beyond that into next year, it's definitely about these integrations, right? So I think that's really the power. I mean, there's tons of in our case, like we have this Ethereum compatible chain, and that's great, and there's other chains that are like that. And I think really the power of the thing that is going to ultimately differentiate us is this kind of connectivity, being part of Polkadot and being able to leverage these other services. So we have a whole bunch of work that we're doing around providing these kind of multi-chain integrations. And just go into a little bit of detail. We're heavily leveraging kind of the idea of having these basically a library of precompiles. So we have some of them already that kind of appear to like a Ethereum developer, to the EVM, they appear as if they're a smart contract, but really they're then kind of a window into Substrate runtime functions, which would then potentially either access advanced logic like locally, or perform cross-chain actions using the cross-chain messaging protocol XCMP. And so even so, for example, you might want to move like a token movement scenario might move assets from one of the other chains like onto Moonbeam, but then we'll represent it locally as this kind of special precompile, but one that would conform, let's say, to the ERC20 interface standard. So then it can be leveraged inside of all these other DeFi protocols we're working with, but kind of under the hood, it's powered by Substrate and using some of these cross-chain features that come along with being a Polkadot parachain.
Yep, same here. So as of I think yesterday, Kusama Council they approved, speaking of upgrades, they approved an upgrade to add crowd loans and parachain auction functionality to Kusama. Like Derek said, this is another topic even, but basically Kusama is like the exact same thing as Polkadot, just a little bit more experimental in nature. The governance runs much quicker, so 7-day cycles instead of 28-day. So it's a place where people like Moonbeam and us we're building like twin networks. So we're launching on Kusama first with our platform called Karura. It'll be actually really helpful, I think, to all of us, like Moonbeam and Acala, in that we get to kind of do all of this once before the big launch on Polkadot. So we'll be learning a lot throughout this process. That's what's coming in the next couple of weeks, is this whole process of doing a parachain auction where we have to actually bid in an auction against other parachain teams to attempt to win a slot on Kusama's network. It's not like Ethereum where you can just launch any coin. If you're launching a blockchain on Kusama, you actually have to win an auction and then lock all those funds in Kusama's network, and then you basically are renting a slot on Kusama. So that's a hell of a lot of work that we're all doing right now. Then of course, once we launch Karura, then we have to start launching all of the products, getting liquidity and bootstrapping these protocols like the stablecoin that I mentioned to you, getting the DEX running, so all of that stuff. And then as soon as we feel comfortable with that, it's time to do it all again with Acala and go for the parachain auction for Polkadot, launch Acala. So this year is going to be pretty crazy for all of us, but it's definitely fun.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, on my end, what I can say is, on the Substrate side, we're just tagging along, like keeping up with the development that's happening at the core engineering side of things, and that's just that includes a whole bunch of things that I think both Derek and Dan are like have their eye on, namely like XCMP, for instance, which by the way, there's a lot of overlap between Polkadot stuff and Substrate stuff, but they really are separate things. So and others include bridging, so bridging Substrate chains between each other, and a whole bunch of exciting stuff that's going to happen in the year to come for sure. Just a matter of taking it as it comes.
Okay, yeah, there's definitely a lot of like exciting upcoming features as I can hear from you guys. Definitely going to be a great year, maybe next year too.
I just wanted to add on Kusama, because one thing that was, we mentioned Kusama, and we kind of all said, hey, let's not get into this too much, but one very important thing about Kusama is that it's not just a test network, right? It's we call it a canary network for chains to use before they go live, for their full production parachains. And what makes it not just a test network is that there's actual real economic incentives at play. So Kusama tokens are worth real value. And the reason that we need that is because we realize we can't just test these full scale blockchains without having real economic incentives, where that's the main security anchor point. So Kusama is a canary network with real economic incentives.
Yeah, definitely. I think once I learned about Kusama, it actually is very, very interesting. Like I didn't now realize it's like an experimental test-ish version of Polkadot, but also it's real economic incentive, right? So then it's definitely a more realistic simulation of Polkadot. Yeah, make a lot of sense. Yeah, so I think thank you, Sacha, Derek, and Dan for covering a lot of the great topics on Polkadot, Substrate, Moonbeam, and Acala. So I think now we're just going to open the floor for questions. So you can either kind of for the audience drop the question in the chat, or you can just mute yourself to ask questions. So just checking on the chat. I think we have one comment saying, my understanding is that Polkadot is a relay chain, so it is not really correct to define Polkadot as layer 0 when compared with ETH and other blockchain providers. Any comment?
Yeah, I think the way we create analogies for things is probably more geared towards like the general public than maybe this audience, like the people on this call, like engineers who like they really understand the stuff at a deep level. That is kind of the comparison that we use just to kind of paint a picture that makes sense in people's head. Sacha may have a better, I think the way Sacha even explained it first is probably more accurate in terms of the relay chain and how all these chains connect. But yeah, that's just a more kind of generic, non-technical explanation that I used.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, it really depends on how you want to make the analogy, right? My own personal opinion is that the nomenclature just becomes a complete, it almost becomes like, are you more leaning to the left or the right of your political spectrum? Like, does it matter though? At the end of the day, the relay chain provides the base layer security. And probably it might be actually more productive to think of it as it's kind of a new way of thinking of what is a layer 0 versus layer 1. And I don't really know what that mapping looks like from where like the Polkadot ecosystem stuff to the sort of previous what Ethereum is and their kind of nomenclature for layers. But the fact is that it's the base layer for security of other chains that want to benefit from it.
I mean, would it be helpful to just like offer like a high-level explanation of like how Polkadot works? I mean, I don't know if everyone already knows that, but I mean, I can just offer kind of like a high-level description that.
Go ahead.
I mean, the thing that's a little bit different about Polkadot than other standalone blockchains is that you kind of have this like split responsibility. So there's like the relay chain has a bunch of validators securing the relay chain, and then as a parachain. So, this kind of runtime that was discussed, it's compiled like to both a native and a WASM like target. And so when you have this WASM binary, part of the act of kind of attaching as a parachain to Polkadot, you're like uploading the actual like runtime as like a WASM binary. And then so you have this whole pool of like validators on the relay chain. And then like on like a block by block basis, there's like a random selection of like those validators out of that pool that kind of come in and will, check or finalize like blocks that are produced by the parachains. And then flipping it around to the parachain side, the parachains are responsible for like block production. but not finalization. So like you have this special kind of node type called a collator. The collators are like underneath the parachain. They're producing blocks, blocks, but basically then they offer those blocks up to the relay chain, and then they're like finalized by, validators on the relay chain. So you had to have this like, the parachain is kind of responsible for block production and for liveness characteristics, but the finalization and so when we talk about security, that's coming from relay chain validators that are using this kind of uploaded like logic that the parachain teams have uploaded to basically recheck the contents of the blocks and kind of finalize and perform finalization. So that's kind of maybe everyone already knows that, but that's just kind of a high level sketch of like how Polkadot works as a system.
Yep. Okay, Sacha, you just unmute yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna jump. I see this. The other question is on solidity engineering and what the best mental model for picking up substrate is. And I feel like Derek actually is the. I don't know why I unmuted myself there, but I feel like Derek can probably like give more insight than me per se, because I'm knowledgeable on the tools out there for solidity engineers that want to like do substrate stuff, but not so much of like the mental model that is required.
Yeah, I mean, we've hit on some of the themes already that like, when you're doing runtime development, you're just kind of operating at a lower level. I would say that, if I just, from a practical perspective, if you're developing smart contracts in Solidity, if you're moving then to Substrate, I mean, the big thing is just Rust, right? So you're using the Rust programming language instead of, this, JavaScript-like language. So I think that's one big thing to get over. And then, Substrate itself, as a framework, I would say, it's obviously very powerful, but it also, there is learning involved in just learning how to use Substrate. In general, I'd say that it's, it definitely requires just some knowledge of like how blockchains work in order to understand how to use it. So those are the two things. But I would say that, once you're past those, then you have quite a bit more design space to draw on than just a regular Solidity smart contract, because you can, you have like, any kind of data storage you want. You basically, and back to the points made before, it's like there's no gas fees, right? You can choose what things you want to perform, but you have to be careful too, right? So, the gas system provides kind of security, like, that you don't do something that's going to, mess up your chain, right? If you do something out of bounds, you kind of get reverted, like on Ethereum. In Substrate, you can, have the concept of weight, which is kind of the expense of computation for what's going to go in a block. And so you have to kind of be conscious of like the weight of different like functions to make sure that, for example, in the parachain context, a thing that you have to be quite careful of is to make sure that blocks you're producing are able to be finalized by the relay chain validators. So that's, you kind of, it's a lower level. I almost think of it like it's like C versus kind of like a higher level language, right? You're kind of at a lower level, you have more power and control, but you also need to know what you're doing a little bit. Otherwise, like, you can get yourself into trouble.
Yeah, it comes with the responsibility. I think those are very good points. And like, just kind of, I want to throw in there the motto of engineering on the Parity side, which is verify first and write last. So that's something that you as someone developing with Substrate, really kind of write that all over your board. Kind of remind yourself every day, verify first and write last, because you're given a lot of freedom, but it comes with a responsibility. Yeah, and you mentioned weights there. I think that's kind of like maybe would be a good point on the mental model that's different. The way that we calculate fees, transaction fees in Substrate is by every function has a weight, and there's a maximum weight that's written before the function call, and then at the end of the function, then you actually calculate the real weight, and then the weight value gets kind of reimbursed based on what that function actually, the execution time of that function really was. So it gives a lot of flexibility on the one hand, but you could run into trouble if your function is actually takes much more time than your block cycles. So I think the concept of weights and such is very unique compared to Solidity.
Yeah, thank you. So I think Dan also kind of putting the chat, like there's a 6-week Substrate specific bootcamp. So people interested can click on the link and look into it. So I think I saw Chris raise his hand, so you can go ahead, unmute yourself, ask a question.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, cool. Following up to Derek, so Derek mentioned the collator validator relation on the relay chain. So I was wondering, what's the relation look like? So you mentioned the block producing and block finalizing. What's the difference? So in Ethereum, being the traditional blockchain, we don't have this two-step, finalization. So if I am on the parachain, what does mean that block is produced to me, and what does that mean block is finalized to me for me?
Yeah, I mean, well, Ethereum doesn't, it only has this kind of like Bitcoin's probabilistic finality, right? So it doesn't really have this formal concept of finality, but, a lot of proof of stake systems do, right? Where, final is final, right? That means that, this thing is not going to get, reverted or kind of, or changed. So, I mean, the same thing exists here where I think until like a block is finalized, it can't be depended on in the same way as a block that like is finalized. And, I mean, right now, I mean, just to give you some sense, I mean, the finalization, like on, if you are producing blocks, there's like a production part, a 6-second block time, like on Polkadot itself. And then the finalization is kind of lagging behind by like, 1 to 2 blocks, something like this. This is kind of how, how it works in practice. And yeah, you have like APIs available where, you can understand like when your block has been, finalized. So, I mean, this is something that is a bit of a mental shift. I mean, because we've been working with a lot of Ethereum developers where they don't really have this, this feature doesn't exist in Ethereum. So, they're kind of used to kind of giving guidance to users of like, hey, just like wait some amount of time, and then you can kind of consider it as, safe to assume that you're not going to get, that there won't be, transactions won't be reverted. Here in the context of Polkadot, you have this better option where you can understand like when, things have been finalized, and then, you can even like inform the user or kind of, create opportunities to kind of like, add make statements that with guarantees like back to the user, right? That like their transaction is definitely like, not going to get changed.
Okay, got it. So basically 1 to 2 blocks finalization after it's produced. Okay, sorry to chime in. I have another question. I know there are questions down the pipeline. So Polkadot has this parachain crowd loan function, but in order, like everybody trying to get in order to get the parachain slot, every project is issuing tokens to attract dot holders to vote for them. What do you think of the approach? I think there will be a lot of tokens for the parachain to release to the circulation supply. What do you think of that?
I can answer, but I almost want to give like Dan, you're almost like an expert like in this. Do you want to? I mean, I know. Do you want to like answer on this one?
Yeah. So basically, your question's around like the auction process, Chris.
Yep. So basically, every parachain project will give out a lot of tokens, basically for getting the parachain slot.
Yeah. And then, yeah, so I guess, do you want to know how that works? I can explain that real quick.
Is a dot holder bound their dot, and they get, let's say, Acala token.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is basically what I was explaining with the parachain auction process. So you have to go through an auction on Polkadot to win a slot on the network to launch. But there's 2 ways as a team to actually bid in that auction. One way is with a single account. So if you're a huge dot holder, you could just bid with your own dot and your team could win the auction and you launch. The other way is to do what's called a crowd loan, where it's like crowdsourcing dot from your community. All of that dot from your community is then locked after you use it in the bid in the auction. So the team doesn't actually touch it. All that dot is locked in the Polkadot relay chain. But in return, there's a distribution of that team's native token. So in our case, ACA, would be distributed at a given ratio to the amount of DOT that any individual contributed to that crowd loan. And then what happens is all the DOT is locked, like I said, for the duration of the parachain slot. So that lease, the maximum on Polkadot is going to be 2 years. So let's say we go for a 2-year slot. You as a contributor would then have your DOT locked for 2 years, the duration of that lease. And then after 2 years, you actually get all of your original DOT principal back. So the main trade-off that you're making as a DOT holder, if you do want to contribute to the crowd loan of one of these parachain teams, the main trade-off is that you have to unstake your DOT, which right now is like 12-ish%. You give up that staking returns in order to contribute it to the crowd loan. So that's the trade-off. Does that help?
But does that mean there will be a lot of ACA going into the circulation supply very early?
So that also depends on the team. So the way we're doing it we haven't finalized the numbers for Acala yet, but for Karura, our first launch on Kusama, we're doing that exact same model, but with KSM instead of DOT. And when we distribute those tokens, 30% of them will be liquid at launch and 70% of them will vest over the year, over the 1 year course of the parachain slot on Kusama. So there won't be, like all the liquidity won't be there, but 30% will be for people to do whatever they'd like. Use it within Acala's DeFi platform or anything else.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris, for the
Thanks.
question. Yeah. So just going down the list. So next question we have in the chat is, what are the most interesting upcoming project in the Polkadot ecosystem besides your own project? Maybe from Acala or like Moonbeam perspective, what are the projects that you partner with that excite you the most?
Yeah, one thing I'd say is just to be very careful right now. We're in a bull market and there's a lot of people using the Polka brand to raise a bunch of money. Web3 Foundation actually today just released a part of the wiki that explains like how to watch out for scams basically. But with that said, there are a lot of really good projects. So, I mean, I guess I can just name a few that we work with quite a bit. So of course, Moonbeam, Centrifuge is doing some interesting things. They've already done quite a bit of good work in the Ethereum space. Then there's like infrastructure components, like Subquery is building basically like the graph for the Polkadot ecosystem. Teams like Fala Network for security and privacy, Plasm for smart contracts, Manta Network is building a privacy-focused DEX parachain. That's just to name a few. I don't know, Derek, if you have other thoughts.
Oh, you know, a lot of those folks are like our partners as well. So, you know, I think a lot of overlap on that list. I mean, like I said, I'm pretty hot on like the ones that are kind of infrastructural in nature. So, you know, someone like Crust is a partner of ours that provide a storage, you know, oriented chain. You know, to take an example, Kilt is like a, you know, team that is kind of pursuing like, you know, verifiable claims and different kinds of identity, you know, solutions. So, I mean, those ones, these kind of more infrastructural chains, I think are, you know, are the ones that are of interest to me. And then, you know, the ability to basically build applications on top of those. I mean, I think, you know, a little bit of, you know, I think obviously development will get easier, but my sense is that like, you know, launching one of these parachains is like not like that, you know, it does require like, you know, a bunch of kind of skilled engineering and kind of focus to do. So I think that, you know, I just don't think that like just your regular run of the mill application team is going to necessarily want to do that, like, you know, or at least a lot of them. So I think that insofar as there's kind of these building blocks that they can use, that's kind of like where I see things kind of moving in the, you know, in the future.
Okay, thank you. So next question we have is to ask the panelists if you have any comments on Polka DEX and collateral pay. I don't know if you heard the. No.
Don't know enough to
Okay.
comment.
Yeah, I don't know that stuff. So.
Okay. No problem.
There's a lot of projects like building in the ecosystem though. So like every day I'm meeting new ones. So it's kind of hard sometimes to keep track basically.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so I think we have about like 4 minutes left. Actually, just another question. Where are most of the Polkadot and Parity community located?
So across the world, really. Like, I mean, so Parity's head office is in Berlin, so a lot of the team is there. But a lot of, we're located all over. Polkadot is a Parity develops the infrastructure for Polkadot, but Polkadot really is more anchored in the Web3 Foundation that is based in Zug, Switzerland. And I guess while I'm on this topic, we're actively hiring. So wherever you are, like just kind of reach out, because it doesn't mean that the head office is in Berlin that we don't hire anywhere else. So just saying.
I would just chime in that, like, obviously Europe, I mean, it is pretty globally spread around, like, and I think Europe, there's definitely a lot of folks in Europe, but, we've been finding lately that, there is also a pretty strong presence in Asia and in China in particular. Like, there's a lot of community members from there. But, actually, Dan, he has like firsthand knowledge of this, of having worked with like a lot of the communities of it. You probably have a better sense of where people are.
Yeah, people are everywhere. North America and Europe are always very strong. And then, yeah, like you said, Derek, there's a huge presence in Asia. A lot of the projects, a lot of the parachain teams are actually out of Asia, even I think more than are not. So, and then our team specifically is kind of unique. Our founders are all in New Zealand, which has been killing me this week with hours. They start their day at 6 p.m. my time. So it's been interesting, but yeah, there's actually like 3 or 4 teams in the Polkadot ecosystem out of New Zealand. But yeah, there's the communities pretty much everywhere now.
We also we're in the middle of a hackathon that's happening in India right now. Mm-hmm. So that's also cool. Community growing over there.
Okay. Yeah, definitely globally distributed. Yeah, so we have about like 2 minutes or so left. I think a lot of folks might need to go to class at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So just want to ask the panelists if you have any like departing thoughts, and also like comments on how like Stanford students get involved, since like you have shared so much about Polkadot, Substrate, Moonbeam, and Acala, that all the audience is like super excited. So how can they get involved, either like internship or full-time or like hackathon?
Yeah, I'll just add to Sacha that I think everyone's hiring. If you're a Rust developer or a Solidity developer or a Substrate developer, you're going to have job offers coming at you from all directions. So that would be one thing, would just be to look into that Substrate Developer Academy that I sent you. I think at this point, it's still the only one in the world. So definitely great for people who do have a little bit of experience in Rust prior to that. And I posted my email here if anyone else has questions.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say that, you can feel free to like message me like directly if like you're, looking for like a position, like, and have, either Solidity or, kind of Rust, like, development skills. We're definitely hiring as well. But, outside of that, I would just encourage you guys to like, try out Substrate basically, because it is definitely like quite a bit different. It gives you a lower level kind of experience and control over, whole blockchain environment. And I think that you'll find that it's probably pretty interesting relative to like smart contract development. And we need like, kind of the parachain teams of the future, like to come from folks like yourself. So I think I would recommend that.
Yeah, definitely, definitely check out like any ways you can get involved. There's so many ways you can get involved, whether it's just kind of curious, check out what Moonbeam's doing, go and, mosey around in their repository, just like you can contribute, right? This is a lot of, all of this is open source. And on the Parity side, yes, we're actively hiring. So just in general, like there's so much that you could do if you wanted to get involved. And I think the best first place to get started is check out Substrate, go through our tutorials. So I shared the link of our Substrate Developer Hub. That's just substrate.dev. And there you can see tutorials that are just kind of meant to easily get you started with building the first substrate chain. And then I also shared the link of the biggest conference that Polkadot has every year called Polkadot Decoded. It's happening next week, May 19th and May 20th. So I strongly encourage you to go there and maybe check out some talks that are interesting to you and register. And of course, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll leave my email in the chat. I'm always happy to chat. If you guys have like something you're working on that's like substrate related, I'd love to sort of help you out if I can and connect you in any other way.
Awesome. And also, I think we're the Stanford Blockchain Club and trying to also compile a list of job openings in the blockchain industry. So if you, Derek, Dan, or Sacha, you feel like there's some position which will fit the Stanford students well, we can pass on those job position to us, and we can relate to the Stanford students. Yeah. So actually, I saw another. I think will be quick question. Is just asking, what's the best DEX or DeFi platform on DOT? Or there is no such concept.
I'm biased, but that's what we're building. So check out Acala. I already DM'd Phil our website, acala.network. Okay.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Derek and Dan and Sacha. Thank you so much for coming to Zoom today and to share with us about the Polkadot, Substrate, Moonbeam, and Acala network. I have learned a ton about Polkadot and the ecosystem, what's happening, and so exciting, right? What's upcoming, a lot of great things will happen this year and all the way, I think, to next year as well. Yeah, so thank you for joining us today. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Thank you. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.